coming to sit here this morning, I just realised that I've got one of the best jobs in the world, because every Friday I have coffee with friends and colleagues, and then I find new friends and new colleagues. So it's just a joy to be with you today. Let me provide some context to our conversation today. And as Ashni said, it's with Gulnara Minnigaleeva and Moira Allan on changing the perception of older people. Now, social and pedagogical work for older persons in governmental organisations in Russia was the title of Gulnara's doctoral thesis some years ago. And following this study, she decided to focus her career on non-profit management and furthered her understanding as a Fulbright scholar. So she has tremendous background and understanding in this field from an academic perspective. And it was around 2006 that I started to know Gulnara. And that was when she was doing an internship at the WHO Aging and Life Course Department that was run by Dr. John Beard at that time. And she became involved in the WHO Global Age-Friendly Cities project. And now we know that that is the global network of age-friendly cities and communities and many thousands of cities around the world. What fascinates me with Gulnara and your journey is that you took the leadership and understanding of this project, you know, the work under the Fulbright scholarship, you know, your PhD, and you led a project in your hometown in Russia and helped create an organisation of retired persons, and it's called Wisdom Ripening. And this led to the development of the Republic of Bashkortostan's Age-Friendly Cities Regional Program. So, Gulnara, you're one of those unusual characters that take a wonderful body of evidence in academia and translate it into action, you know, at a local level. But then further on in 2019, you know, you co-founded the online B-Stage Academy and Club for older adults in Russia. And you're now working as an associate professor at the National State Research University Higher School of Economics, where you actively promote age-friendly policies. And since we met many years ago, you now have a daughter, 5 years of age. So you not only go from working with older people, but creating new life for them to move on. Gulnara is also the global liaison of the Pass It On Network, and many of us know the Pass It On Network. So I'm also delighted to be in conversation with Moira Allan, co-founder with Dr. Jan Hively of the Network of Positive Aging Advocates with liaisons in 65 countries. So this is going to be a conversation that goes backwards and forwards like good friends. You know, the Pass It On Network advocates, as we all do, a UN Convention on the Rights of Older People, but most particularly for the adaptation of the narrative around growing older and for intergenerational solidarity to help ourselves, our families, and our communities. So that's the background to this wonderful conversation. So welcome, Gulnara and Moira. Perhaps you could just say a few little words, and then I'm going to leap in to ask a question of Gulnara. So Gulnara, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's great to be in this conversation.
Good.
Thank you.
And where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, in the Caucasus Mountains.
Good. Okay. Well, I hope the scenery is wonderful and the air is fresh.
It is.
Good.
It
well,
is.
send us some images, all right? And Moira, thank you for joining us from Paris. Perhaps you could just say a few little words.
Thank you so much, Jane. This is such a pleasure and a little bit unexpected because it only happened a couple of days back. But I'm so pleased to see that Jan, our co-founder, is with us. And I must say she's got up at 4 o'clock in the morning because she's now living in Portland, Oregon. So thank you so much. And I look forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Moira, and thanks to Jan. 4 a.m. is called commitment, all right? Or lack of sleep.
Exactly.
Or lack of sleep, none of the So,
Exactly.
Gulnara, to start off with, and of course we welcome questions from all of our cafe people this morning. What was the impetus after a successful academic career, and it's not that you can have one and then the other, to return to your grassroots, you know, your origins, and to help create wisdom ripening? What was the impetus for that?
You know, and it's interesting that to say it's not common to have both, but for me it was very important, you know, to have practice behind the academic knowledge, and also to have academic knowledge behind practice, like back in this practice. And well, for me, after I received my master's in nonprofit management and my PhD in education, and with my work on older adults education, you know, for me, there was a personal reason behind this. My mom got retired not so long ago before that, and she just didn't have anything to do. And that's why, you know, I started from there. But then after this internship in World Health Organization, I realized that there were more opportunities to actually involve older adults, and to do it with them, and to actually, well, not do it by for them, but by their own hands, let's say so. And I think I had very good teachers at the University of Minnesota, including Jan Hively, by the way. That's where we met. I went to her course on aging, and yeah, one of the main ideas that I already knew and that Jan was promoting is that actually older adults, older people, or any person, they can do things for themselves. And that's why when I came back to Russia, I said, okay, Mom, let's do it. Let's start our nonprofit organization, not just nonprofit organization, but association of older persons. And, you know, in Russian, it has the name My Years Are My Treasure, which is a common phrase, actually. It's from one of the songs in Russia, and I think it sounds really good. But also the English name, Jan helped me to choose that one, is a wisdom ripening, which kind of reflects the same idea. Yes, and so my years are my treasure. We get this wisdom when we grow older, and I still keep to that. I treasure my years, and I hope we'll continue.
Yeah, you know, I think that's an important phrase for us to all refer to, and to live in the now. I want to now talk about this. Voices of older people are central to various ideologies and practice. We talk a lot of them about, you know, bottom up and top down, and where are the voices of older people? And I wanted to ask both of you, because quite often we hear the same voices of older people. And my question to you is, how do we reach those that we're not reaching? Because without their voices, we really don't have the collective understanding, because we know older people are not a homogeneous population. How do we reach those that's going to be important. So perhaps if I can hand that to you, Moira, how do we get to, you know, those people that perhaps don't want to talk to us? Or
I
we
think
don't
that's an absolutely, number one top priority question, because we're all talking to the choir all the time.
That's right.
I mean, if I just look around the screen, there are people, if I haven't met personally, I certainly know their names, and happy to see Cynthia and other people. It is a major question, and what do we do about it? We try to open up and do more things. For example, in France now, we're going to be doing a European project with the Youth Forum, and it's going to be on democracy and how we're going to broaden democracy. And it's a European funded project, and one of the stipulations is that we have a broad spectrum in our audience, not just the people that we usually know. So we need to approach migrant organizations and youth organizations and so forth. So that is just one little example, but it's a capital question. And I often think that it would be a really wonderful idea to organize, and the Pass It On Network would be very happy to do so, but to get together with you, Jane, and other people from leading organizations and say, how are we going to burst out of the choir? How are we going to get into the audience? And from that, maybe we could get some very positive ideas, because I think we're all in that situation.
I'll take that one on notice, and you can count on IFA.
Great.
So we will help make that happen. One thing that you mentioned there, which I think is really interesting, is methodological approaches. So purposefully, seeking out. So from an academic perspective, we could be calling on that to be, a minimum standard, right? So Gulnara, what are your thoughts about how do we reach those that we're not reaching now?
That's a really good question. And, at the university I work for now, I teach a course on population and aging, and I have a special class on those participative research methods, that you really, as a policymaker, as a doctor, as a social worker, you really have to engage with the people and ask them what they want. Do they want to talk or not? What's important for them? And it's just a matter of asking questions. But of course, it's difficult because it's an extra effort and extra time, and also you have to know what questions you can ask and what not, and also include those questions in the process of organizing things. And I understand that for my students, it's just difficult to understand generally that you have to ask questions, It's not that you just propose what to do. And for me, it's a really complicated question too, how to do that.
Look, it is complicated. Yeah, Moira?
I just wanted to chip in there and just say something that we've been doing at the Pass It On Network. We've been having interns. And the very first one we had was thanks to Gulnara, and his name was Bekta, and he brought such a fresh approach to us. But since then, we've had a couple of interns, and it's been such a thrill to see them changing, going from a not understanding at all about what age is all about, to brightening up and really blossoming into the full knowledge of they themselves are going to be old and that there is a world ahead for this whole thing. So I would, one of the ways would be to use more and more interns and open their eyes, because they're going into their own professions, and our issue touches absolutely every phase of life and every activity.
It does, but I want to put it back to you, because I came back yesterday from Italy. There was a meeting over there, and on the way back, I dipped into the Netflix film with Robert De Niro when he was senior.
Oh, wonderful!
Now, it seems to me that we live in a very valued-based society, and I don't know of many intern programs that actually focus on older people. I mean, perhaps we need to actually disrupt, because I think we can do it on an individual basis, but how do we scale it up? So the question back to you, Gulnara, is from a cultural perspective, talk with me a little bit, and also the friends around many coffee tables today, the cultural perspective of older people in Russia, and because we often say, we need to view aging through the lens of gender and culture. So talk with me a little bit about that, about how your engagement with older people in Russia, perhaps could have been different from the engagement of different cultures when you worked, at WHO. Were there any differences?
I see that I think the Russian culture is quite similar to the Western one in this question. And the attitudes have been changing. Like even I can see these changes a lot, maybe because I deal with the aging like on everyday basis, but it changed so much from the beginning of age-friendly cities that we did in 2006. And when I did the first research, there were some ideas, but people just didn't pay too much attention to age, really. And today we have government programs, regional programs. We have a huge program in Moscow, which is called, let me translate it, like Active Longevity Program.
Okay.
Moscow Active Longevity Program. And it's huge, like really, really, I see a lot of opportunities for older people to get involved, to learn, to just be active in the community and online. And I couldn't imagine that happening just 10 years ago. And now we can see it there. Yeah. But still, the attitude is such is that old age is something that you need to postpone as much as possible. That you need to disguise and cover, and as I was telling in my class, I have a lot of African students. It's an online program, and they live in Russia now. And when I'm telling them things from the Western perspective, based on the Western research mostly, because this is what we have in peer-reviewed journals and textbooks. This is Western research, and actually it's fascinating because 2 years ago I taught the same courses for Iranian specialists on age and social workers, and now I teach this class for African students and students from India, and some of them are from Russia, and their perspectives are quite different, and when they told me, okay, we see that all the women in Moscow try to look younger. They dress like younger women, they put on makeup and things like that. And this is what you do not see in my country. And they come from different African countries. I don't know if it's true for all African countries, but for some of them. And they say, in my country, if you are old, you are proud of it. You don't hide it. If you are an older woman, you are respected. You know that you deserve this respect, and you don't try to hide your age. And that was a discovery for me, that it's really a different perspective. And in many Western textbooks, they say that this is already long gone, it's not there anymore. But it turns out it is. And evidently, there are different conditions, different attitudes, and that's all very interesting.
Yeah, look, it is interesting, and it's interesting to understand how we can interpret these discussions and make good policy. Because we have one of the action areas of the WHO being combating ageism, but it would look and feel very different in various parts of Africa as it does to Canada. And it's this African notion, Moira, that I'm going to come and turn to you, because we had an earlier conversation about countries of origin. and yours is South Africa and mine's Australia. And I know that you have family in South Africa, and the Pass It On network, you know, are very, very loud, positively loud in South Africa. So what are the voices of the Pass It On network in Africa saying to you about older people?
Well, it's a very good question. And just to chip in after what Gulnara was saying, I was at the residence of our South African ambassador in Paris on Sunday because it was Heritage Day. So I was standing in the queue to get a drink. And somebody came up to me and said, come, you must come right up to the front of the queue. And I said, goodness me, why? And I said, no, well, you deserve it. She didn't say because you look old, but she very charmingly got me to the top of the queue anyway. So that's just a little aside. In Southern Africa, we've got a very lively network of the Pass It On network. We're in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Lesotho, South Africa itself, and also up into Mauritius, because what we're doing is calculating ourselves on the African Union's economic communities. So that's why we have these different countries. And there the attitude, especially in some of the countries, there's a lot of economic hardship. COVID was wicked, and you know, its effects have been felt all over the world. But you asked me about Africa, so I'm talking about Africa. So the effects of COVID have really knocked them sideways, and the economies, and people are really suffering a great deal. So the organizations are now trying to get together to help each other, but on a very basic level. What I can also say, which is very interesting to me, is that Africa is not as well equipped at the moment for everybody to be on the internet. So, but on the other hand, everybody has telephones, smartphones, and the WhatsApp system is working like a bomb. For example, we have one of our Pass It On network people who's absolutely extraordinary. His name is Tom Holloway, and he lives in London. And he was an engineer from IBM. And when he retired, he's now going 90. So when he retired a couple of decades ago, he got involved in India. And he spent 8 months of every year in India working with the untouchables and teaching them digital literacy. And he now, because of health, is based in the UK. But he's helped every one of our local people in Southern Africa in our group to set up WhatsApp channels. So we've got the University of the Third Age with Pass It On network, of course, WhatsApp channels, and they're absolutely amazing. And they are so lively. There's so much chitter chatter. I'll just give you the example of how they work. For example, one of the first ones was a dentist who recorded 90-second clips on dental care. So there were 7 or 8 of them. And then they published them on the WhatsApp platform at the beginning of the month. And for the rest of the month, people exchange on them until they're changed. So they've done all sorts of subjects. And it has been one of the ways, to come back to the earlier question, of broadening the audience, because we have to talk to the audience in the language and via the medium that they can actually capture. The other thing that I'd just like to mention about Africa is that we've been in very close contact and with great admiration with Omakara, Dr. Omakara, whom I'm sure is familiar to a lot of you. And they're doing absolutely outstanding work in Nigeria. They're setting standards that I think that we just haven't got very practical. Just the one thing, for example, was that they've moved into government departments, and they've persuaded government departments to train special people for the older population. So they take sort of middle-aged officials, train them, and then there'd be a specific desk for older people, be it in the transport or the education or the health departments. And I think that that is just such an absolutely practical, down-to-earth, positive way of attacking things. And
thank you.
Very, very interesting.
Look, thank you for those examples. And IFA are going to welcome the collaboration of Pass It On Network for our Cape Town conference in September 2025. So we'll be reaching out to you as well. I'm just going to now, and I acknowledge, you know, I think in just a very short period of time, you know, her leadership together with many others, you know, in Africa have really made very practical steps to help influence and shape policy, and particularly in the position that she has now. I now want to turn to some questions. I haven't got through half of my questions, but I'm going to go to Cynthia first. Cynthia, I will ask Shmuel's question and then I'll go to Marie Beaulieu. So Cynthia, you've got a very interesting question for Gulnara.
Oh, well, first of all, it's just such a delight to be on this with Global Cafe with both of you and see so many familiar faces, but meet new ones. But I'm particularly curious, Gulnara, with you said your mother is newly retired. And I just wonder how she is confronting ageism among her peers. And if you might be able to share any strategies she's using or you're using with your new organization to really help overcome, because for many of us, it's a lifelong accumulation of a lot of ageist attitudes, and particularly for women.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, well, she's not newly retired. It was 20 years ago. But I can talk about the strategies, and it's actually this possibility to have a different life, just another life after life, you know, like life after work life, I mean, yeah, because, well, yeah, for her, it was not possible at that time when we started, like for a few years before we started this organization, there were no other outcomes. It's like, okay, you're retired, all you have is your TV, your grandchildren, maybe your small gardening plot if you have, and yeah, that's it. But when we actually started this organization, and every year new people come there, and some of them don't really realize that there are opportunities. So this is just, you know, having some place to go and get involved and do something and suggest what can be done. That's, I think, what's important. And that's what they do much more often in Russia now. Many more initiatives now. And like I said, in Moscow, there's this huge program. It's a governmental program. It's amazing.
Thank you for that, Cynthia and Gulnara. Shmuel, who is with us every single week, and I mentioned him to you when we had our briefing session, you know, he wants to hear a little bit about, you know, how as you grow older, you know, what's important around social well-being and resilience. You know, how can the environment, you know, support social well-being and resilience as you grow older? Moira, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. And I think that, you know, I'll just share this with you. I was very happy to do a course, an internet course with Dr. Bill Thomas. And I'm sure a lot of you know Dr. Bill Thomas, who's from the Eden Alternative. And I really, really, really liked the way he attacked this whole question. Because the environment is one thing, but I think that the essence of everything is the individual, actually. And we need to change our own ways. And he put it this way, and I really thought it was very pertinent. He said, from the time you are born and you get that first slap on your back and you take your first breath, your imperatives are to grow and to develop. And those imperatives remain with us throughout our lives until we breathe our last breath. As Jan always says, meaningful work, paid or unpaid, through the last breath. But the environment then, it's an interplay we work on the environment and the environment works on us. And I think one of the biggest tasks that we all have as individuals today is to stand up and make our voices be heard. If we're in an environment that's not friendly to us, and if we've got buses that travel so jerkily that you just about fall over every time they stop, we have to stand up and say that.
Look,
and it has to be a total interaction. You know, you can't passively sit there and expect the environment to respond to you.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree about self-responsibility, but I have a little bit of a debate around, you know, that that we have to stand up and say something. You know, I think that, you know, some of the great challenge is that we expect, you know, older people to have a voice or younger people to have a voice. And we know that function is about the interrelationship between the individual and the environment. But if someone is born into poverty, it's very difficult in that environment for them to have a voice to even get out of poverty, because there are generations. So I think we've really got to understand, you know, the impact of the environment. And, you know, and I hope, Greg, you won't mind me saying, but, you know, one of our sons has been an addict since a very early age. And the environment in which he lived in gave rise to, you know, this behavior. Now, since being in an environment where he runs, he's supported with people that he understands. He is healthy, he's grown, and so it's the person and the environment across the life course. So I think that there's a real balance, you know, in this notion of responsibility. I am so privileged. I have a house, I have food, I have people that love me, but it's a real balance. So I'm going to go on to ask Marie Beaulieu and then Anna Maria, and I'm going to keep moving through them. We've got lots of questions. So Marie Beaulieu.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Gulnara, Moira, very happy to see you both this morning. And when I saw the title of this session, I felt very invited for this discussion. When we're talking about changing perceptions, we can work in so many spheres. And I was thinking about the political sphere, and I would like to hear your thoughts about what is the voice of older persons in the political decision right now, and how can they express it? And mainly, is this voice really heard? And do we have the diversity of older persons able to express their voices in the political sphere? So sorry, it's a broad question, but I think it's very important to think about that.
Oh, look, it's a great question. And it's funny you bring this up, because I saw that the government of Canada has extended the time for expressions of interest to be on the council, the seniors council. And it strikes me that diversity is what is called for. So Gulnara, you know, your perspectives about this really complex question, older people in politics, where do we fit?
I think Russia is in a very special position here. And, you know, we have such a long history of political oppression of people's opinions. So this is a really difficult question. Older people do participate. They vote in a very disciplined manner. But, you know, they vote for what the government says is correct. You know, it's so most older people. So it's kind of, I don't think they represent like their own needs and ideas, or they don't even think they can represent them, or maybe they don't have. It's complicated.
You know, and we talked a little bit about this, Gulnara and Moira, in our briefing. You know, that cultural settings give rise to, you know, behaviours. And I know that my dear mum, you know, she was an ex-voter all of her life, regardless of what the government were doing. And so I think, you know, Marie, is there room for diversity? There is, but perhaps we actually have to create that space, that safe space for diversity to be okay. And I'm not sure that we do that very well. Moira, did you want to make any comment about the perception of older people in politics?
Yes, I think it's obviously a very vital and important question. I'm involved quite often with the European Union through the Age platform, and there's a lot of lobbying between Age platform, which is a representative of all the aging organizations in Europe, and Europe now is up to about 26% of the total population, which is over 60. So that's, you know, a huge slice of the population that doesn't always get taken into consideration. So there've been several, there's, you know, you can go back and back and back, and there've been all sorts of policy decisions. As you know, that the European Union can't legislate per se. It develops directives, and the directives then go through to the nations, and the nations then decide to what extent they're all going to implement them. And I think in paper, there's a great deal of progress that has been made. In practice, that I think things are really changing, but it's slow.
Yes.
But the intention is there, and the successive presidencies of the European Union, be it the Danes, be it the Portuguese, be it the French, they've progressively taken this issue as well. So I think from a policy point of view, it's improving, and from an application point of view, it's slow.
It's improving. I'll take that as optimistic. So,
yep.
Anna Maria, would you like to come forward and ask your question? You with us?
Sorry, I was mute. Thank you very much. I said that I love the previous question. Excellent question. I think the elderly population lack of civic participation. We are too passive. And also, Dr. Barrett, you mentioned about diversity. In the case of Canada, we are a multicultural society, but multicultural seniors are excellent at showing case our contribution to a culture, economic, finance, everything. But we shy of asking or talking about our needs. We are extremely behind on that. And also we assume that the elected members at the different levels of the government, they know our needs.
Yeah.
Well, we have to talk. Even they know we have to talk to have solution. Yeah. Having said that, I go into my specific question, and it's something that concerns me, is the digital divide. Because the digital divide divided more us during the COVID. But after COVID, some became more engaged virtually. And technology has proven to be an excellent connector to reach the corners that were not reachable before. It also helps to address the issue of transportation, the transportation crisis, people with mobility challenges. But we have the digital divide, not only into having the gadget, the phone or the tablet, and the access to internet. So I think there is a need to work towards that. And we, the elder population, will have access to incredible sources and activities that are offered virtually. And
Maria, we're just going to stop you there. So the question is about the importance of, you know, is there a digital divide, and what do we need to do about it? Is that right?
Exactly. And how we can help it.
Okay. So perhaps I'll go to Moira. Just a short answer, Moira, because we've got lots of other questions.
Well, very quickly, we're very much onto this issue. We have monthly 50-50 webinars, 50-50 because we talk for 50 minutes or half, and we want to have this kind of dialogue for the rest of the time. And the last and the most recent one was on digital equality. And we had perspectives from India, from Africa, and from the United States. And it's clear that this is a very vital issue for everybody, because there's so many different aspects to it. It's the social aspect, but then there's the actual aspect of managing these platforms that get more and more complex because they need to be more and more secure. But I think there's so many people working on it, and governments as well, and big companies. It's a huge issue. We all have to adapt.
I think it is an enabler, but I think that we must remember there'll always be a certain part of the population that does not, cannot, chooses not to engage. And I think that we've got to, be really clear about, what are the different ways to actually listen to different subpopulations of people as they age. I'm going to ask Kathy Kubert. Would you like to come forward and ask your question?
Yes, thank you for this interesting discussion. I'm interested in the intersection of ageism and ableism, both from more of an individual as well as a societal point of view. In terms of the individual, people that are aging with disabilities, not to overgeneralize, but they tend to be better advocates, and as compared to older adults that are newly acquiring, various impairments. And I think the latter group tends to be more isolated and challenges in terms of having them be engaged. And then a societal point of view, obviously, is even some anti-ageism campaigns tend to feed into ableism. So I'm just curious if any thoughts you can share in general about strategies to, or anything feedback you have on this, these issues. Thank you.
Thanks. Gulnara, would you like to respond to Kathy?
It's a new term for me, ableism. And yeah, does it mean like really trying to enable people to do things, or
yes,
did I get that wrong? Yeah.
No, you got that right. See, well done. Yeah.
Okay.
It's about enabling.
Yeah, and well, and and I want to return to that question of environment, and I think there's a lot about environment and also general, perceptions of the population, because the perceptions change, and that enables a lot, of course. And yeah, some things that 20 years ago were not possible, like having a modeling agencies, like, for senior models. They are all around the world now, and they are quite popular in Russia, and could not be imagined 20 years ago, really. So I think,
it's interesting, the definition of ableism, is the discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. And, I think what the WHO, ideology is, which IFA supports, is the person, the environment. But, I think we've been dealing with this notion of ableism for as long as I've been here, because I know my brother, really struggled with being discriminated because he wasn't able-bodied. So I think it's something that sits, within the heart of growing older as well, doesn't it? Even if there is a gentle decline in capacity, it's being able to. I just want to ask, I don't know what's happened to the hour of coffee, but Nancy Hoden, I'd love you to come forward and ask your question of Gulnara and Moira.
It follows very closely to what Gulnara just said. And, there's obviously wonderful work that's being done at a political level, at the global institutional level. And yet sometimes we just are hitting our heads against the wall with people still having these very backward ideas on what an older person looks like, what an older person can do. And you mentioned something about a model, and there's Christy Turlington walking in the Ralph Lauren show last week. I mean, she looks amazing. And is it important to have mass media behind this? Last night, I recorded it. I didn't watch it. Last night was the premiere of The Golden Bachelor. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversation during that hour, which we're all going to be like, oh God, I can't believe she said that, or he said that. And it's still that same language, but it's an image of a 71-year-old dating, finding life, finding purpose, finding a new life, with another human being, which we never relegate to that age. How important is that? And should we really be pushing people to do more in that area?
I think it's a great question. I haven't taped it, Nancy, but I'll certainly be watching it. That's my time where I watch rubbish, all right? But it really is an important conversation that we continually have. And I wish I could be looking like Christy, but, it's just, but even in saying that says something, doesn't it? So I'd really be fascinated with both Moira and Gulnara's comments. Moira, you go first, and then we'll go to Gulnara. Great question, Nancy.
But I think it is a great question, Nancy, and I think we all bash our heads against the wall on this particular question. But I think what is very important, and I go back to this notion that Bill Thomas is advocating, and that is to promote aging literacy. And that starts at school. So we've got like at least 20 years ahead of us to carry on bashing. But I'll just relate this just little story. I went to the English bookshop in Paris the other day to seek out books on Greek mythology for my niece's daughters. And I couldn't find, I found one book, which was very poor, but I did find several books on gender issues for children. And I'm sure that they've been working on that for a long time, but that's what we need. We need to have books about the development cycles. And development psychology is as old as the hills. That's what we all know, but it doesn't seem to seek down into reality. But that's what we have to do. We have to show children about, plants, they grow, they flower, they're beautiful roses, they etc. And get that into children, and eventually we'll come right. But I think at the moment, the attitudes are so ingrained that people don't. And we as older people are very often the biggest culprits, because we adopt what society reflects on us. And it's such a complex question. It's not, there's certainly no quick fix. That's for sure.
It's interesting, this whole, I think we're going to have a whole cafe on this, couldn't we? Wouldn't that be fascinating? Because I know, Nancy, you've done a lot of work in fashion, in that arena. And, perhaps it starts with us, and we try for it to keep working. And, Gulnara, you said to me when we started, I think you're very brave, Jane, to step down from this position, and what are you going to do? And my first thought is, I'm just going to be irresponsible for a while. And, while that sounds pretty silly, there is one bit of me that just wants to go and feed the sheep and the goats in the local farm. And then the other time do something, something else. But your viewpoints, Gulnara, about this real challenging social conversation we should be having. What are your thoughts?
I think I want to mention 2 points, and one is there's another great series going on right now, which is Sex and the City, and the continue of that show, and I really enjoyed it. I watched it 20 years ago, and I was younger than the heroines at that time, than and today I'm again younger, but I can relate, I can see the future, I can see what will be happening, and it's really interesting. And it's a provocative show. I would say they raise quite a lot of questions. And I bet in Russia it's more complicated, you know. I see quite a lot of people saying they are disgusted to see it. And it's like, okay, well, I'll talk to you when you are 20 years older, like, okay, what you will say. And also another point is about education, yeah. And what Moira was saying, and you were saying too, and that you just have to educate people. And I can see my students. And again, it's like their world is like turning over. And I had some reflections from the students after the course that they're like, okay, you've changed my world. I now know that I'm gonna live long and not just survive at the end of my life, but I have a future after I'm 30, 35, and even 50. I still have a life, you know. So yeah, I think it's important.
You know, what an incredible contribution you're making to those people's lives. You know, just that comment about you've changed my world. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more than a student to say that, you know, so hold on to that. Now we're going to step away for a couple of minutes and I'm going to introduce the next topic for next week. But I want us to sort of think about whether this is a conversation that we need to have. And Nancy, I'd like to sort of come back to you at some stage and suggest that we have you on and talk with you about your work, your journey, what you've been doing, which is fascinating. So I'm going to call on you next week. I'll drop you a note, all right? I think we need to continue this because it also intersects around, you know, ageism, value, worth, productivity, and I think that's important. So just pausing that for a moment because we're going to come back to Moira and Gulnara and ask them for their takeaway messages. And we do have lots of other messages in the box, so please, you know, have a look at them. Denise, yes, Gracie and Frankie, I've watched some of that too, and you're right. And gerontological courses, you know, need to be part of high school. Great. So please join us next week in a conversation about the implementation of integrated care programs for older adults. You know, another critically important area, primary integrated care is one of the 4 action areas of the UN Decade of Healthy Aging. And Dr. Neem Lennox-Shugani will be here. She is the Chief Executive of the International Foundation for Integrated Care in the United Kingdom. So come ready for your questions because integrated care is really about, you know, improving the pathways of care, you know, mitigating health system costs and ultimately a healthier population across all ages. So Dr. Gulnara Minnigaleeva and Ms. Moira Allan, I only got through 2 of my 6 questions. That's because we had such a vibrant conversation and I thank you. So now is the time that I ask you, Moira first and then Gulnara, to just share with us just a couple of takeaway messages and then I'll make a few closing remarks to finish the session. So Moira?
Well, because I've harped on the whole question of development psychology and life course, basically, I'd just like to make, you know, make a comment about Maslow. You know, everybody talks about Maslow and his self-actualization basis, but the theory, but basically not that many people talk about the fact that before he died, so much longer in his research, he talked about the next stage because self-actualization could be a bit selfish, self-actualization. And he went on to talk about transcendence. And that's when we become mature and we pass on. And that's what's so important. And that's what Jan taught